Welcome to the 9th recording in Intro to Mobile. In the half semester sequence, this will fall week 4 into week 5. So week 4 if you want to be a little ahead of the game, and week 5 if you're not. So what we're going to talk about today is the deployment steps for deploying an Android app. Once again, I looked at using Apple's deployment steps, but I'm not able to because my account doesn't have access. So we'll use Androids, but again, there are going to be a lot of similarities. So while I'm saying Android back and forth, keep in mind a lot of the same stuff will apply for Apple as well. So we're going to start with the preparation checklist, which I found on the Android developer website. Okay, there are 18 steps. Sounds like a lot. It's really not that bad, though. A lot of them are kind of go without saying. So we're going to look through each of these steps, understand the process, understand policies, test for quality, determine content rating, determine country distribution, confirm the size, app ranges, free or priced, in-app billing, localization, promotional graphics, APK, beta release, product details, badges, final checks, and support users. So once again, you might think, gosh, why are we going through a launch checklist? We haven't even written an app yet. Well, these are the things that caught me. I spent a lot of time writing the Plant Places app and then looked at the launch checklist and realized I had missed several things that, boy, had I only known about them when I started writing my app, it would have made my life a lot easier. So let's consider these now. Let's consider these early on so that we don't get caught with them later. So first, understand the publishing process, and that's a big one. Okay, the publishing process can be broken into several steps. In one moment, bring this over from another screen. Okay. Actually, you know what? We'll just dock that in there. How about that? There we go. So what do? We prepare the application for release, and then we release the application to the users. So setup, develop, debug and test, publish. A few weeks ago, I talked about 3 different things that have to be balanced: features, quality, and timeline. And I said you have to balance those. After I did the recording, I remembered something that we said during my undergraduate days, which was, this is what my professors told me in the 90s when I was in a software development program. They said features, quality, and time. Pick any 2. So generally, you can focus on 2, but not all 3. If you want a lot of features and a lot of quality, it's going to cost you a lot of time. If you want a short time frame and quality, you're going to have to reduce features. The worst combination probably is to pick features and time and ignore quality. That's not something you want to do in an app store like this. So in any case, don't neglect the debugging and testing. That might take longer than you think, especially if you have a lot of users. And then finally, we'll go to publishing. Okay, so prepare your application for release. We want to take out any log messages. So it's common when we're developing an app to put in a lot of logs so that we know where the app is going. We're going to need to take those out. This surprised me a bit. In most apps I've worked with, it's common to have logs and have those logs available to you for production apps so that you can go back and find out what things happen. But that's something we have to take out in Android when we publish. Okay, build and sign a release version of your application. This one's a bit interesting. You have to get a signature key, which is free. It's just a process where you validate who you are. Okay? Then it's very important that you don't lose that signature key, because that is what, number one, in Android allows you to use things like Google Maps and other plugins. Also, it's what tells the Google Play Store you are who you are. If you lose that key, then you're not able to deploy updates to your app. So it's very important, keep that key, okay? You could lose a lot of good history if you lose that key. So what I need to do, let's say I'm on Plant Places Android here. If I wanted to create an APK version with my key, I'd right click. Okay, sorry, I'm hourglassing for a moment. go to Android Tools. I'm not sure if you can see this on the recording because it looks like it's not popping up there. But in any case, Android Tools, export signed application package. Okay, it's going to take me through a set of prompts here where what it's going to do is it's going to build the application. Okay, it asks me which project. It's going to make sure there aren't any errors. Okay, obviously we want to take care of that if there are any. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to go find that key store, and then I'm going to need to put in my password. Okay, what that will finally do is that will build what's called a signed APK. And again, if I'm going to publish in the Play Store, I'm going to need to upload a signed APK. So 1 second here as I go to Google Play Developer Console. So I can log into the Developer Console, and after I've created the signed APK, I can upload the APK. Now, this is going to contain things like the app version. Every time I upload a new app to the, or an updated app to the Play Store, I have to increment that version. And in Android, what I will do is, 1 second. Whoops, okay, sorry, running a bit slowly right now. In Android, what I will do is I will go into the Android manifest, which we talked about just a little bit ago. Let me try and bring that up again. Okay, so there we go, Android manifest. Well, this is what we call an XML file that describes the application. So let me go, we'll just look at the raw XML. Okay, take a look at this. Version code, version name, and package. You see that in this Android manifest? Version code, version name, and package. Okay, that's all information that's part of my application that's going to be needed when I release my application for the Play Store. Let's see. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so we'll go to the... Okay, you might have seen a little blip there. There was a bit of a gap in the recording that I just took out. But in any case, I'm clicking on the APK over on the left, and you see the current version is version number 5. And then you see the 5.1 here. Here are previous versions that have now been removed. Oh, now that's interesting. That's new. That's new. Okay, professional translations. Okay, so the current version is 5.1, and you see if I go back to my Android manifest, you'll see the one I'm currently working on is version 6 or 6.1. So that's the one that's currently in development. Probably around September 2013, I'll release that. So good about 8 months, probably about 8 months, because I want to make sure I release something that's quality, that all the new features are tested. But if I wanted to release it now, I would hit upload a new APK, and then I could go here and choose the APK. It will not let me upload it unless I've incremented that version number. So that's very important to do. Okay, 1 moment, please. Okay, so test the release version, update the application resources for the release, all the images and things like that. Now here's a big one, preparing remote servers and services that your application depends on. The Plant Places application depends on the Plant Places website. So for instance, if I navigate to plantplaces.com/Perl/mobile, and then I think I called it color match .pl red equals 200 and green equals 200 and blue equals 200. I'm going by memory here. But in any case, things like color match, what it's going to do is it's going to go to the plantplaces.com website. And so one of the things that they're saying, yeah, here we go. So what I did is let me put in something that's a deep red. So let me go to green 20 and blue 20, which will basically be, I'm going to go to red 220, green 20, and blue 20, which is basically a heavy red. Okay, and then Control U will show us the source. So this is what Plant Places Android is going to hit when it does those queries. It's going to come in here and hit this page on plantplaces.com. Now, it might seem a bit obvious, prepare remote servers that your application depends on. But that's actually one of the last things I did because I know if I need to change plantplaces.com, it's easy for me to go up there and make any changes. I can do that without releasing a new Android app. Okay, so I can change the program that makes this output here without releasing a new Android app. So it kind of left that towards the end. But needless to say, that is part of the entire experience we're giving to the user. So we need to make sure that we have those ready to go when we go live. Who knows? Maybe the app is very popular, and so maybe we'll get a lot of traffic. Okay, so how do we release the app? There are several ways to do it. Probably the easiest way is to go through the app marketplace, which is, in other words, the Play Store. So as I was showing you here, there are things we can do like our store listing, put a description of the app. This is one thing that's very interesting. There is a local Android developer user group in Cincinnati. There's also one for iPhone. Most developers will have a developer group. The Android group meets every Wednesday, either a learning session or a social session. So I went to the Android group this week and I mentioned I'm averaging about one download per day, which is a bit lower than I had hoped for. And I asked around, I said, how do you improve this? And what people told me is how many of the 4,000 character limit am I using for the description? And I said, well, not much. Obviously, I'm not using much. They advise that I put as much as I possibly can in here because this is what's going to help the user search. So obviously, I need to use a bit more of that. Promo text, I'm doing okay there. Recent changes, I'm not too worried about this. But this description, when people search for an app, this is what they're going to find. So that's something I need to beef up to try to improve the number of downloads that I have. But that is one nice thing, is that the Play Stores will help you to distribute your app. They will also help you to manage it once it's released. So if you have an update or a bug fix, it will help you get that to users who already have it installed. So, what are the alternatives? One alternative is to release it through an email. Another is to release it through a website. Okay? You don't have as much control here because you don't know who has it installed. However, there are two times you might want to do this. Number one, if you have an app that you don't want to make available to everybody. If you have maybe an internal app for a company or something like that, that's something that would be good to release over email. And it's honestly quite easy. You send an email, receive the email on your phone, and the prompt looks like this. And then all you need to do is click install, and the app will install just like if you got it through the Google Play Store. Okay? So one is if you have maybe a private app or something that you don't want to go through the Play Store. Also, if you have just a little test app that you want to write without paying the $25 to get the Play Store developer license, you can certainly do that as well. Now, here's another big reason that you might want to distribute through email or a website, and this is what I used. You should test your app on multiple platforms, on multiple hardware. Okay, it's important to test your app on multiple pieces of hardware. And you want to test it before you release it. Now, here's the trick. As developers, what we oftentimes do is go through the same flow on our app. We don't click certain buttons or we avoid certain areas of our app. We tend to forget what a normal user will do. Also, we tend to know more about our apps than an average user, so it's easy to forget things. It's easy to maybe not get confused where a normal user might get confused on an app. So it's important to have some other people test out your app before you list it in the Play Store or whatever app store you're using. So for mine, I had my wife and several other people, including some people at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanic Gardens, go through and try out the app and look for bugs. I let that process go for about a month. So I gave it to them in January and let it go until they didn't report any bugs for about a month. And only then did I go ahead and package and put on the Play Store. But it's interesting because they will click other buttons that I wouldn't click, or they might try things I wouldn't try, or they might read the app in a different way than I would read it. So before you release, very seriously consider releasing the app via email or website to some friends of yours. Then after that, when you have released it, tell them to go ahead, uninstall it, and then reinstall it from the Play Store. So that's a very good option to have. Okay, so that's the publishing overview. Next, policies and agreements. This is pretty straightforward. Don't spam, use your own intellectual property, and don't have misleading ads. So let's start with the don't spam. Okay, for spam, these are the kind of things you'd see on. These are the kind of things that you see sometimes where people try to overload with magic words. So I showed you that description. Okay, what you want to do in the description is what they have in bold here. Highlight what's great about your app, describe it accurately, don't repeat words, don't use unrelated words trying to get in search terms, and keep it brief. Okay, so here we go. Title, nice and short. Description, very concise. It talks about the app. Okay, this is something that you'd see on search engine optimization a lot, where you'll have, a description here, and then a whole bunch of keywords just to grab the search engines. Obviously, Google doesn't like that very much. Okay, something else Google really doesn't like is when you use other words unrelated to your app to try to bring people into your app. So, um, you know, we don't know much. Google, of course, won't say much about how their internal search engine works, how their optimization works, but we don't want to make them mad. We don't want to make them mad. We're going to want to be very careful and list exactly our app and only what our app does. Okay, excessive detail. Okay, here's some excessive detail. Again, just trying to put a bunch of words in, and then advertisements for other apps. So things that we're going to want to avoid. Obviously, you can't do things like phony user reviews. You can't, create phony accounts and do user reviews. I've never reviewed any of my own apps. I've never submitted reviews for them. I've never asked explicitly for reviews. So generally, I kind of want the process to take care of itself. Don't try to manipulate ratings. Don't solicit ratings through incentives. So you can't say rate my app and I'll give you something. Don't rate it multiple times. Don't add improper content. A lot of this is pretty well. A lot of this is pretty well self-explanatory. So don't spam in your listing. Okay. Intellectual property. Once again, this a lot goes without saying. Don't be somebody who you're not. So don't try to mock or imitate somebody else's logo. Okay. Don't try to look very similar to something else. Don't violate copyrights. Make sure anything you load on the app you have permission to load. So any images, anything like that. Luckily, for plant places, all the images are internal to plant places. So we don't really have any, we don't have any copyright infringement there because we either own the images or we have agreements with the original photographer to use the images. Now, people oftentimes send requests to plant places asking to use our images. Just the fact that they have sent the request, I appreciate because I know many other people don't do that. We typically will let anybody use our images. We do ask that they ask for permission. We do ask that they cite our name. But generally, we will respond with, yes, we'll be happy to allow you to use our images. So we get those requests more than I thought we would. If you need an image, one thing that's a really good idea, if you need an image, is just go to Flickr or any other site like that. And when you search, you can go to advanced search and you can search only for royalty-free images. So that's a very nice option. Let's see if I can find advanced. Well, I know it used to be up here, but that's interesting. Okay, so well, let me go to an advanced search. It used to be like an advanced search up here, but in any case, um, that's one option. You can definitely find a lot of good images to use on Flickr. See, we didn't have this when I was in school. That's a nice option to have. So consider that. Consider royalty-free images or something like that. Okay. Advertisements. You can run ads through Google. You can use the ad view to have them place ads for you. Okay, naturally, they want to make sure that you're not exceeding the maturity of your audience with those ads. So don't show anything tobacco, gambling, anything like that if you have an app that is open to everybody. Um, Okay, if we continue on, there are these things called, you can't use, you probably see this a lot in websites where it pops up a message and it tries to redirect you and it tries to trick you into thinking that you have viruses. You can't do that. You can't do that on an Android app. Similarly, if you do an ad wall where you ask somebody, you try to redirect somebody to a service, you have to give them an option to cancel out. So again, pretty self-explanatory, but those are the policies for creating and deploying an app. Okay, so continuing on, a test for core app quality. We already covered this. This was our last lecture. So we're currently in lecture number 9. This is what we covered in lecture number 8. All of the core app quality. Things like don't let services continue to run after your app is closed. Be able to switch from portrait to landscape and vice versa very quickly. So we've already been over the core app quality guidelines. Determine the user's rating. Okay, for rating, we need to consider things, as I mentioned earlier. We need to consider things like if you are using location services, it can't be open for everybody. Okay, if you're using violence, you probably want to have medium or high maturity. If you're doing a game that has some kind of violence, probably want to do a medium or high maturity. If there's any gambling involved, again, medium or high maturity. And they provide some rough guidelines for it. Google provides some rough guidelines on what different ratings are. Okay, one moment, please. Here we go. Okay. And again, this is pretty obvious, but we don't want to run afoul of any of these things. So the one that kind of jumped out at me is if you are using GPS, it can't be rated for everybody. Pornography is not permitted in Google Play. Okay. That one is not permitted for iPhone either. And Steve Jobs' famous quote was, if you want porn, go to Android. But here again, Android, that was Steve Jobs' quote. Here again, Android is saying the same thing. Pornography is not permitted on Android either. Okay, alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, if there are any references, medium or high maturity. Gambling, medium or high. Hate speech is not allowed, but inflammatory content must be medium or high. Location can't be everyone. Profanity, medium or high. Sexually or suggestive content, pornography is not allowed. Any suggestive references must be medium or high. Okay. So again, no major no major surprises here. Just make sure that you're when you look at that app content rating that you're setting it properly, and that's something that you can specify in the Play Store. I don't recall. That's interesting. See, there are new things every time I look here. Content rating. You see, I have Plant Places as low maturity. There's no graphics, no suggestive material, alcohol or tobacco. Um, there is, however, location search. So I have that as low maturity. Okay, your location is one of the things that we have. So that's where we can set that. That's where we can set the maturity level in the Play Store. Okay. Country distribution. Once again, I mentioned that if you're going to distribute to non-English speaking countries, you probably want to think of localizing strings for them, localizing text and strings for those other countries. if it's Bulgaria, if it's somewhere in the European Union where English might not be the primary language, but is spoken freely, like the Netherlands, probably you'd be okay. But Spanish or French, you'd probably want to think about doing translations for that. For plant places, the nice thing about plants is the scientific name is all Latin anyway. So I went ahead and released to the whole world. Okay. Confirm the app's overall size. When we created that, sign your app step, that creates that APK file, and we can just look at that on the hard drive to see the size. The APK file for plant places, not very big actually. It's just a few megabytes. I don't remember. I want to say it is on the order of about 3 to 4 megabytes. Not too big because it doesn't contain too many images. Where you're going to want to watch for 50 megs or more is something like a game that has a lot of animations, a lot of images. That's where things are going to start getting big. Okay. Confirm the app's screen and compatibility ranges. So we have something called a Min SDK version. This is a double-edged sword, especially in the world of Android. Min SDK, Target SDK, I have as 12 on version 6. On the previous version, version 5, I had it 8 is the Min SDK version. Here's where it's a double-edged sword. We want the biggest audience we can possibly get. So we want to make it available to as many users as we can. If I go to APK, I'm doing this a bit off screen, and let me go to statistics. Okay. What I can do is I can see Android version, how many users, what operating system the users have. So 54 users, about 47% have 4.1, another 11% have 4, another 6% have 4. But here's the issue. A lot of users, about 33%, which is a fairly good amount of users, are using an Android operating system version 2. Now, what that means is I'm limited on what I can push to them. I have to use an older version of Maps, or I have to use kind of a bridge for a newer version of Maps. That version of Maps is a little bit hard to program against because it's hard to tell when a user is moving. I can tell when a user is moving. It's hard to tell when the user gestures on the map and updating the map. It's doable. It's just tricky. If all of my users were on version 4, then I could use a newer version of the maps, which is much easier to use for me as a programmer. But if I do that, then I'm ignoring a large potential audience that I don't want to ignore. Now, another consideration. If I take my app to version 4, anytime I access the network or the database or anything that's very resource intensive, I cannot do that on the user interface thread. That takes a little bit more work. That's a requirement of Android version 4 or greater. We have to really minimize the things that we do on the UI thread. So the good thing about version 4 is I get more resources I can work with. The bad thing is I have to, well, it's not really bad, it's just a consideration. I have to spend more time tuning my app for version 4. And also, I would maybe rule out some users in the meantime. So, something we really need to be careful here. I'm not comfortable requiring version 4 until the number of users below version 4 is very small, as in maybe 5-6% or less. Until then, I'm going to continue to support all users. So something to consider very carefully. Okay. Decide whether your app will be for your price. Here's a trick. You can sell your app and then later in life convert it to free. You cannot start with a free app and then later in life charge for it. Okay? That's a bit of a dilemma. I was really debating, do I sell Plant Places Mobile for $1 or do I give it away free or what do I do? Because I wanted to get out early. I wanted to get this out and make it something very valuable. But on the other hand, I wanted to see if I could maximize revenue from it as well. So there are tricks that you can do. What is common is to have a free version Like one of the apps that I have, which is a shopping list app, there's a free version. But then if I want to synchronize the app with my wife, I have to get the Pro Unlocker. So the free version is free, but then if I pay something like $5, I get this unlocker, and that opens up more features. Another option is at any time you can add in-app billing. So you can have very basic things and then charge for more advanced things. My thought here was I was going to make Plant Places entirely free, and then if you wanted to upload your GPS points to a map on plantplaces.com, I would charge for that. I thought about doing that, but first I wanted to see how many people used it. In reality, not a lot of people used it, so I decided to just go ahead and give the whole thing away for free. Now, keep in mind that there are other ways to make money from your app aside from charging users for it. Number one, you get the ads. You can put ads on your app and make it ad driven. Um, you might have to get a little bit tricky with that to actually make a lot of money because the ads generally don't pay a whole lot. So you might have to get a little bit tricky with that and do things like ad walls and things like that. The other thing that I did is redirect users as quickly as I could to plantplaces.com because web ads pay a little bit better than mobile ads do in general. So if I can get a user to go from the mobile website through something like search by color, as soon as I can convert them from search by color to the listing of a plant on plantplaces.com, then I have a potential of generating more money from that user through more web clicks. Okay, so in-app billing, something to look for. Okay, set prices for your products. Again, no surprise there. Localization. So I showed you in our last recording, I showed you the strings.xml file, and here it is again. Sorry, no, that's not it. The strings.xml file, that's where this is good programming practice. We don't want to hard code any text in our app. Instead, Android provides us with this strings XML file. We put all of our text in there associated with the keyword so that when we want to go to another language, we can just copy and paste this list and we can simply change all of the words from English to Spanish or whatever the language would be. So two files. The location where they are tells what language they are. If it's in values, it's English. Values.-es, it's in Spanish. Values-fr, it's in French. Pretty straightforward there. Prepare promotional graphics, screenshots, and videos. Okay, this is what we're going to actually put onto the Play Store. So again, we see the Plant Places listing with the stylized P and then the feature graphic. Okay, screenshots. How did I get the screenshots? Honestly, I just used the emulator. I used the emulator and a normal old screen capture tool and made the screenshots. For the stylized P logo, don't overthink what a logo is. It's really not that hard. I wanted to use the same font and same color scheme we use on Plant Places, which is a brown color and a green color. What's funny is where those colors actually came from. They came from a website I did for a now defunct hotel. But needless to say, those two colors are, kind of suggest nature, the beige and the green. Now, I also wanted, because it's Plant Places, I wanted something that suggested a dot on the map, but I didn't want to steal Google's indicator either, which is kind of this with a little nub coming off. So I just made it a circle, and then I used the Plant Places beige color with black. So how hard was it to make this logo? Not hard at all. I found the font that I wanted. I dropped one beige P. Then I dropped another green P on top of it, and then a black circle. Then I dropped a beige circle exactly on top of that, and another black circle in the middle. So not too hard to make a fairly straightforward image. Now, I told you about my former student, Thomas Biddle, and I'll show you his story here. Let me see, I think I went too far here. He did a resume and made an Android app out of it, and for that, for the feature graphic, he just styled his name in a font. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward to do. There we go. So see, Thomas Biddle, he just did his name in a font with kind of a clear background like that. For Puppywood, let me see what he did for Puppywood. He probably just used the actual Puppywood logo. Yeah, there we go. He just used the Puppywood logo, which you could get off their website, which I think he did that website as well. Okay, so put all those together. Build the release ready APK. We saw that. We want to build the release. We want to sign it with our developer sign. Plan a beta release. Okay, this is where you give it to a couple select users, maybe some friends, some coworkers, colleagues. Email it to them. Give it to them over a website. Have them test it out. Complete the product details. Okay, this is where we're going to go into the Play Store and we'll finish up any kind of description we need, anything like that. Okay, now the Google Play badges, this is a pretty nice feature. Once you've created it, you can go and grab the Google Play badges, and you'll see on Plant Places, on the website itself, I use these as much as I could. So you'll typically find at the very top here we have a link straight to the Android app. Now, if we do something like a search by color, okay, I'll search for Redbud. If we search for a plant which has color in it, we'll find that where it shows the color, or where it shows, here's another thing where you can submit plants that have been identified, it will have that badge as well and say a user with Plant Places Mobile for Android has identified these plants for sale at a retailer. Okay, notice that we have to put the trademark by Android and by Google Play Store. So we can use this, but we have to put the trademark symbol there. Also, we can't call this something like the official Android plant app. I was very careful to call it Plant Places Mobile for Android. So I wouldn't say this is, an official Android app. It just happens to be a mobile app that was written for Android. So a couple of guidelines we have there. Here again, if you're searching for color, the badge comes up again with an advertisement, and again, the properly trademarked using your Android phone's camera. Okay, and there we go. So when you've reached this step in the deployment process, that's something that you want to do is, let me go back here, is use that badge. Okay, final checks, make sure everything's good, and then finally publish and support. Okay, if you do get some ratings that are, that are constructive, let's say, ratings there where they don't like the way your app works, respond to that quickly. If you find out it doesn't work on certain devices, respond to that quickly as well. I mentioned there was a TV show app, and I noticed it had a lot of downloads, but at the same note, it had a low rating, which kind of surprised me. It had, usually you won't see those two together. You won't see a lot of downloads plus a low rating. The low rating was a very significant violation of the quality guidelines, which is that the back button doesn't work. It doesn't close the app. You actually have to go in to see running apps and close the app yourself, which is very strange. It surprised me that they had an app out this long and never bothered to fix that. So that was a bit surprising. Maybe they lost the key store, something like that. So these are the steps to deploying an Android app, and again, they're going to be similar for any other app. If you create a Cordova app and deploy it through Android, it's going to be these same steps. Apple, again, I'm not privy to that information since I don't have a developer account that shows me their checklist. I'm sure it's very similar. I'm sure a lot of similar considerations. So that's all. So this is recording number 9 for week 4, week 5. We will that is in the shortened semester, in the half semester. The next things we're going to look at next week are going to be user interface components and also how to storyboard, which is a bit of fun. So thank you and have a nice week.